It is Thursday, October 16th, and so much happening today. Trump's former national security advisor, John Bolton, has been indicted by a grand jury. Also, the Trump DOJ bringing terror charges against members of Antifa for the very first time this morning. Kash Patel speaking up about this, explaining how big of a deal, how big of a move this is. Also, major restructuring coming to the IRS, and Democrats' chance of winning a majority in Congress next year going down the tubes in real time. Wait till you see this.
Casey, John Bolton, the former national security advisor to Donald Trump, a longtime federal government official, has been indicted by a grand jury. We are learning that through two different sources from our producer, Hannah Rabinowitz at the Justice Department. And we have confirmed that the grand jury was in today with the lead prosecutor on that case, the same prosecutor who had been on some of the documents of the search of Bolton's house just 2 months ago, or not even 2 months ago, a prosecutor who also has some experience in investigating these sorts of things. He was a prosecutor that was also working on the Biden classified documents, handling investigation that led to no charges. But in this situation, the bulk of this case, it's been going on for several years, and our understanding is that it's about John Bolton's use of an email account with AOL, an email account where he was writing diary-like notes and summaries of his time as national security advisor to himself, at times even sending them to his wife and daughter.
Former national security advisor John Bolton indicted today by a federal grand jury, and we've known this day was likely coming for months. In August, the FBI raided his home and office. The media at that time tried painting this investigation as a political one, as a witch hunt, they said. Trump retribution for all the mean things Bolton said about Trump after being fired. Well, how bad these reporters look. It turns out this indictment, this investigation has nothing to do with Donald Trump or the potential classified info that Bolton put in his book, but instead with years of mishandling classified intelligence. Those are the allegations, storing classified info on his AOL email account and passing it around to his wife and daughter, apparently. That's what the media wants you to believe, at least. The media today claiming that's all this indictment has to do with. But look, that's not what we're hearing. Bolton allegedly made a boatload of money consulting on intelligence for various countries and groups, allegedly, and maybe trafficking in intelligence. That would be a huge no-no. And even if it is just this AOL account thing, like CNN's claiming, sending intel to his wife and daughter, even if that is all this is, constitutional scholar Jonathan Turley says Bolton could still be looking at up to 20 years in prison if convicted.
We're not clear as to what that is, but it would suggest that it could be national defense information. The reason that's important is that creates a heightened potential penalty. So you can have penalties that range from 5 to 20 years. 20 years tends to be the sentences for concealing information, obstructing justice. Simply having classified information can weigh in at about 10 years.
Up to 20 years in prison if convicted. And remember what John Bolton said to Trump when Trump was indicted for mishandling classified intelligence. Watch.
What is it like for you to see his mugshot tonight?
Well, I thought it was, as with most things Trump does, carefully staged. They must have thought about what look they wanted. He could have smiled. He could have looked benign. Instead, he looks like a thug. And I think it's intended to be a sign of intimidation against the prosecutors and judges. That's what they picked, and we'll see that picture everywhere.
So you think they actually spent time deciding, should he smile in this? Should he have this scowl that he appears to have gone with?
Almost as much time as they spent combing his hair. And he has committed very serious crimes. This is a devastating indictment. I speak here as an alumnus of the Justice Department myself, because not only is it powerful, it's very narrowly tailored. They didn't throw everything up against the wall to see what would stick. This really is a rifle shot, and I think it should be the end of Donald Trump's political career.
This is the same guy who said Edward Snowden should be hung as a traitor to his country for whistleblowing on the CIA spying program against American citizens. The search warrant on Bolton's Maryland home and D.C. office 2 months ago produced documents labeled secret, confidential, and classified, some even mentioning weapons of mass destruction, according to court records we obtained today. Remember, John Bolton was one of the architects with Dick Cheney of the invasion of Iraq. Not a good guy, folks.
Primetime's hearing Bolton was making a lot of money from overseas and may have been trafficking in intelligence. That wouldn't be putting America first. So Bolton should take his own advice and take a big, beautiful, deep breath.
I think it's important that everybody take a deep breath here. This is a very serious matter.
DHS, with the help of the FBI, working overtime today to disrupt the cartel-backed bounties on high-ranking ICE officials. $50,000 bounties being doled out by the cartels, attempting to solicit Antifa to carry out these hits. These bounties coming over the wire on these Antifa group chats. Well, they're finding out today, this ain't Mexico.
So it's official now. A federal grand jury has indicted that Mexican illegal immigrant who tried to put a hit out, allegedly, on my guest from yesterday. Authorities say this man orchestrated a murder-for-hire plot, and the target, Chief Border Patrol Agent Greg Bovino. That gang leader is accused of soliciting Bovino's killer using social media to put a bounty on his head. The Homeland Security Department warned about the rise of bounties targeting federal agents. The cartel-backed bounties cost up to $50,000 for assassinating high-ranking officials.
Well, this morning, the first terror-related charges coming down on Antifa. 2 alleged Antifa militants charged with terror-related charges, 2 individuals who were involved in an attack on ICE agents in Alvarado, Texas. Zachary Yvetz and Cameron Arnold were indicted by a federal grand jury and charged with providing material support for terror and attempting to murder federal and assisting officers. Additionally, charged with discharging firearms during attempted murders. Kash Patel telling Fox News this morning, for the first time ever, the FBI has arrested anarchist violent extremists and charged these Antifa-aligned individuals with material support to terrorism. Meanwhile, you have jackasses like the governor of Illinois who are fomenting the violence against ICE and Border Patrol. You have people like Don Lemon, fired CNN anchor Don Lemon turned podcaster, who just yesterday told all non-white people to go out and get armed, he said, to fight ICE. Yes, Don Lemon said that. Watch.
Black people, brown people of all stripes, whether you're an Indian American or a Mexican American or whoever you are, go out in your place where you live and get a gun legally, get a license to carry legally. Because when you have people knocking on your door and taking you away without due process as a citizen, isn't that what the Second Amendment was written for? Go back and read what the Second Amendment says. And perhaps it will knock some sense in the heads of these people who are saying, well, it's all great. I don't believe they're doing it without due process. They're asking people for papers. They're not really beating people up. These people are doing things that are illegal. Nobody is illegal. It is a misdemeanor to cross the border.
And you may be saying this is only addressing the end result, right? These 2 Antifa arrests, charging these 2 low-level people with terror charges. What's that really going to do? What about the funders of these groups? Well, there's movement on that as well. We've been reporting on it for the last week. And a new bill by Senator Ted Cruz called the Stop Funders Act that President Trump supports, which would add paid riots to the list of actions that could be charged under RICO. This is probably what the Trump DOJ would need to really hold these left-wing NGOs accountable. Listen to Ted Cruz explain this new legislation and what Trump said about it. Because look, if Trump backs it, if he pushes it, it will move forward. Watch.
Now, I will say one of the most important things President Trump has done recently is he has pledged that he's going to go after Antifa. And what I've been urging is follow the money, cut off the money. And you look at this No Kings rally, and there's considerable evidence that George Soros and his network is behind funding these rallies, which may well be riots all across the country. And Soros is writing the check. And so I've introduced legislation called the Stop Funders Act that would add rioting to the list of predicate offenses for RICO. Why is that? Because it would let the Department of Justice use RICO, racketeering, to prosecute the money that is funding the anti-Semitic protests on campuses, the pro-open border protest in L.A. and other cities, and these No King protests. Anyone that is supporting rioting and violence, it lets you go after the money. And I'll tell you, there are more than 200 left-wing groups behind these No Kings rallies this weekend. They deliberately are blind to what each of the others are doing. That's part of how they avoid accountability. RICO is designed for precisely that sort of criminal enterprise. And so I believe the Senate, we ought to take up and vote on and pass our Stop Funders legislation. And I've urged both Pam Bondi at DOJ and Kash Patel at FBI, follow the money and prosecute those who are writing checks funding acts of violence, political violence or otherwise, across the country.
In another story, Democrats' chance of retaking the House in 2026 have plummeted. The GOP now more likely than any time over the last year to keep control of the House. The GOP's chances skyrocketing, folks. And that's before any of this new redistricting stuff, not including in any way the Supreme Court's possible ruling on the Voters' Rights Act, which they're hearing arguments for this week. CNN's Harry Enton breaking down the numbers yesterday, giving the Democrats another headache to contend with. Watch what he found.
Okay, so, if you go back 6 months ago, you go back to April, Kate Baldwin, what were we looking at? Well, we were looking at the Democrats with a very clear shot of taking control of the U.S. House of Representatives, according to the Kalshi prediction market odds. We saw them at an 83% chance. But those odds have gone plummeting down. Now we're talking about just a 63% chance, while the GOP's chances up like a rocket, up like gold, up from 17% to now a 37% chance. So we'll look like a pretty clear, likely Democratic win in the House come next year. Has become much closer to a toss-up at this point, although still slightly leaning Democratic.
What's changed? What are you seeing?
Okay, what has changed? Well, why don't we just take a look at the national picture first? Take a look at voters and how they're feeling about things. And we can take a look at the generic congressional ballot. And I want to take a look and compare it to 2017, 2018, right? Because that's sort of the baseline. That was, of course, the first Trump term. That was where Democrats were sort of keeping pace. You go back to April, look at the generic congressional ballot. What'd you see? You see +3 Democrats in 2025 in April. You see +3 Democrats back in April of 2017. Now jump over to this side of the screen. What happens? Well, the Democrats are no longer keeping pace with the pace that they were setting back in 2017, 2018. You look back in 2017, you saw that the Democrats had leaped up to an 8-point advantage. I remember covering this. I remember a lot of folks, including myself, saying, you know what, Republicans look pretty decent right now in terms of the fact that they had the House, they had the Senate, they had the presidency, but things were likely going to flip. And I was looking for the same signs this year. The bottom line is it hasn't happened, Kate Baldwin. It hasn't happened. Democrats have stayed basically steady. They have fallen off the pace. Democrats were way out ahead back in 2017 on the generic congressional ballot. And now we're basically looking at Democrats ahead. But again, they are so far in back of the pace that they set back there. And so I think what a lot of folks are seeing, folks like myself, are saying, wait a minute, given what we might be seeing in redistricting, is this +3 going to be enough, Kate Baldwin?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. One change from that cycle is also this mid-decade redistricting effort that we've been covering so much. Add that in, and what do you get?
Okay, so we add that, and we take a look at the national picture, but then we, of course, taking a look at the state legislators, right? They are potentially changing things, and there are two things that are going on here. First off, net mid-decade redistricting gains. If both sides max out at this point, there are more Republican gains possible than Democratic gains. Yes, the Democrats might try to counter a Texas and a California, but you go along in the different states, and basically Democrats run out of room where Republicans are able to gain and gain and gain. If both sides max out, we're probably looking at a GOP gain of +7 House seats. That doesn't even take into account the potential gutting of the VRA that is right now going to be in front of the Supreme Court. If you add that in, you could be looking...
The Voting Rights Act.
What? Yes, exactly right. The Voting Rights Act. If you add that in, then you could be looking about adding 10, 12, 15, 17 on top of this 7 seats. So I think a lot of folks like myself are looking at this. We're seeing, hey, wait a minute. Those national polls are, Democrats are not gaining the way that we expected. Then you add in the fact that the state legislators are adding potentially more GOP seats like they've already done down in Texas, like they've done in Missouri. And then you add in the potential gutting of the VRA, and all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult for Democrats to gain, especially given that they are not keeping up with their 2017, 2018 pace.
And when you look at the prediction markets today, right now, because that clip from CNN, that was from yesterday, Harry Enton was reporting the numbers from these betting sites yesterday. Today, Dems' chances have shrunk even further. Look at this. The Democratic Party only has a 58% shot now at retaking the House, where the Republicans, the GOP, just shot up to 42%. That's technically just 6 points away from a statistical tie. And a lot of this tied to the government shutdown, which Dems are using as a Hail Mary right now to win any possible advantage against Trump and Republicans, but it looks like it's backfiring. Last night, CNN holding a town hall with Bernie Sanders and AOC about the government shutdown, which is odd, isn't it? Wouldn't you hold a town hall with the party leaders, Schumer and Jeffries, the people who should have the power to do something about this, you'd think, right? Unless Bernie and AOC are actually the ones calling the shots here. And during the town hall, things didn't exactly go their way. Watch some of what happened here.
How do you think this shutdown reflects on Chuck Schumer's leadership?
Well, I think it reflects more on Mike Johnson's leadership and President Trump's leadership. This is a leadership which said it's okay to give well, how do you feel? You tell me. Think it's a good idea to give $1 trillion in tax breaks to the richest people in the country and then make massive cuts to health care for working class people?
I think Chuck Schumer has voted for continuing resolutions 13 times in the last 4 years, and he has the opportunity to vote for one again, but he's refusing to come to the table.
I think, look.
Let me know what you think about this. Do you buy what they're selling, folks, or is it just too damn obvious? Clearly, they're the ones voting no, voting against funding the government, when you have one side or a group of politicians who are voting yes to fund the government, and then you have the other side voting no, not to fund the government. There's only one side who's forcing the government shutdown. And what are they voting no for? They're saying we demand $1.5 trillion more in government spending in order to vote yes. So I don't know. How exactly is that Republicans' fault? Let me know what you think. All right, that wraps up this episode. Like, subscribe. We'll see you next time.